Only Murders in the Building, Season 5.
The hit Hulu original is back.
The night Lester died, he was talking with this mobster.
Was he killed in a hit?
We need to go face to face with the mob.
Get ready for a season
Buongiorno, signore.
Oh, this is how I die.
you can't refuse.
You're gonna save the day, like you always do, by being smart, sharp, and almost always by mistake.
The Hulu original series, Only Murders in the Building, premieres September 9. Streaming on Hulu and Hulu on Disney Plus for bundle subscribers. Terms apply. New episodes Tuesdays.
Once upon a mundane morning, Barb's day got busy without warning. A realtor in need of an open house sign. No, 50 of them, and designed before 9.
My head hurts.
Any mighty tools to help with this plight?
Aha!
Barb made her move. She opened Canva and got in the groove.
Bulk creating Canva sheets. Create 50 signs fit for suburban streets.
Done in a click, all complete.
Sweet!
Now, imagine what your dreams can become when you put imagination to work at canva.com.
You're listening to the For the Good of the Public podcast, brought to you by the Center for Christianity and Public Life. We're your hosts. I'm Michael Ware.
And I'm Phebe Meyer.
And Phebe, not every day that we can say on this podcast that we have a former head of state on the show, but we can say that today we have a really special, insightful episode for you. We'll be hearing from former Prime Minister of Slovakia, Eduard Heger. And Prime Minister Heger is someone who we got to know really just in the months leading up to the summit. And I just thought we need to bring this incredible leader to our audience. I was able to spend some time with Prime Minister Heger and was struck by sort of this meeting point of sort of leader and history, leading within NATO, within Europe at a very critical, tumultuous time for the region, and also was struck by his really wonderful personality, his deep faith, and I think all of that shines through in what was a really serious set of remarks that he delivered in front of our audience in October.
Yeah, this talk focuses on what is required of our leaders in tumultuous times. And it is rare to be able to lift up a model such as Prime Minister Heger. And what we need in this moment are leaders who are willing to tell the truth, who are honest about the challenges that their people are facing, who respond with care and compassion and have a spirit of generosity. And Eduard Heger is a leader like this. His spirit is also so kind and generous, and I think that comes through in the talk. And he talks very openly about the challenges that he was facing and leading Slovakia through the escalation of the Russian and Ukraine war, through a pandemic, through an energy crisis. And it really struck me how much hope he had as well in casting a vision for the future of Western Europe, as well as just for democratic nations. Yeah,
you know, Phoebe, there are so many reasons for this, but the models of leadership, our idea of sort of what is required to lead, what is required in politics, the sort of our imagination is so constricted, and there can sometimes seem to be just a few sort of models, usually crafted through conflict and antagonism and caricature. And one of the things we try to do throughout our summit, but really throughout the whole of the work at CCPL, is help to expand and reground our imagination for what public leadership can look like, the kinds of values that can ground public leadership and motivate it. And so I just thought, not to say, right, the whole point is not everything Prime Minister Heger did was right and everyone should. No, that the idea is that there are all of these multifaceted ways in which leaders and Christians can show up in civic life, in public life. And it was just an honor to hear from Prime Minister Heger in this setting.
It really was. Yeah. The talk you're about to hear is Democratic Leadership in Fractious Times. Eduard Heger became Slovakia's Minister of Finance in 2020 and later Prime Minister, leading the country from 2021 to 2023. Fun fact, he's also an avid runner and cold water swimmer. This talk was originally recorded at the 2024 For the Good of the Public Summit in Washington, D.C. A video recording of the talk and all resources, including ways to follow the speakers in today's episode, will be found in the show notes.
Well, thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. It's great to be here from the Central Europe. Slovakia, I don't know whether you know Slovakia. Please raise your hand if you know where is Slovakia. Okay, that's very good. Thank you. Yeah, it's this beautiful 5.5 million country in the heart of Europe, as we say, in the very center. And I welcome you to come and visit us. One important fact about Slovakia, besides we have beautiful mountains, we have beautiful lakes, beautiful valleys, a lot of nature, a lot of forest, but we are the greatest car producer per capita. We produce all possible brands, so please come to visit us. The reason why I'm saying that I'm coming from Slovakia, and as I was introduced, thank you very much for the great introduction. I was a prime minister between 2021 and 2023. When we got in the government in 2020, the COVID just started. So I don't really know what it means because before I was an opposition politician. So I don't really know what it means to govern a country in a peaceful and normal times. So, and I'll be speaking about some of the facts that I encountered as a prime minister or minister of finance during the times in government. And I'm going to try to bring you a view from the region where our neighboring country is under the war with Russian Federation, actually with Vladimir Putin. And I'll tell you how it feels over there. Because I travel a lot. I was just recently in Taiwan in August. And I could see, and I like that very much, and I like to speak to the people of that particular region, how they view those world matters that are happening right now from their corner of the world. And it's very important because there are different perspectives and it can be enriching us, but it's important that you hear also my thoughts or the thoughts of the people from Central Europe actually as a neighboring country. Today, I was very glad to listen to the discussion that was before I stepped in about democracy. And when we look at the topic or we look at the democracy, I think, especially looking at from Slovak perspective, we are in times where there is actually a battle. It's not a battle or a war between Russia and Ukraine, but it's a battle. It's a war between autocracy and democracy. And I will share why I think that. But before that, let's look at the background. What's going on in the world these days? As I look at the politics within Europe, I see it also in Asia, and I think you see it here also in US. It's almost, actually it's a month. It's less than a month, right? Till the elections. We see a great polarization. And I'm surprised being here in US that the level of polarization, and actually I used to come here 20 years ago, 25 years ago, and what I enjoyed very much about the United States, when you had a different opinion, nobody felt offended. Here, you can feel also the polarization. And here in Slovakia and in Europe, you can feel if there's two opinions on political matters in one family, it can stop relationships. To that extent, it can go. So we see the polarization. We also see conflicts around the world. War in Ukraine, the brutal attack that we just remembered yesterday, the year from the brutal attack in Israel, right? And we see what's happening in Taiwan. As I said, they waiting and hoping for the good, but they're not sure what's going to happen to them. And we see that, as I said, the democracy is state tested by the autocracy or autocratic regimes, and it's being also mocked. I don't know whether you see it here, but in Europe, and especially in Slovakia, we are flooded with disinformation and propaganda. And actually, you can hear more and more, they say that democracy is at the end of its cycle. And it's really scaring when you hear those kind of messages. We see that the politics is as a show. I see it very much in Slovakia. I see it also in Europe, and I don't think that is a good sign. And I also see a lot of aggressive and violent language. In Slovakia, our current prime minister, unfortunately, there was an attempt on his assassination, 15th of May this year. But one of the things that we cannot forget, prior to that, as he stepped in, he's the fourth-time prime minister, when you would listen from a top representative, because prime minister, even though it's not the highest constitutional position, it's still the person who runs the country, who is in charge of the government, who basically does all the important decisions. And if you hear that kind of person speaking about as he will choke somebody in another office because he's not pleased with his decision, or when he thinks, when he says that the opposition leader should be really beaten like with axes, etc. I mean, those kind of words are not really good when they are spoken out by high representatives. And this kind of violent language we see present in Slovak politics, unfortunately. We see personal attacks in the political debate, mockery, and we also see, as I said, a lot of disinformation. Well, the reason why the disinformation started, you have to understand, when Russia invaded Ukraine, they thought that they will do what they did to Czechoslovakia in 1968. That they will just march in with the tanks and we will be with, like empty hands. We can helpless and we cannot do anything. Well, the Ukrainians said, no, we want to protect our countries, and they went to fight for their freedom and for the democracy and for their future. And that's how the invasion all started. And it was surprising. I was at the European Council at the 24th of February 2022, because we flew all the prime ministers from the countries. In the morning, the war started. In the afternoon, we already were in Brussels. We flew in and we had a summit, and we were having President Zelensky on the screen in the evening, and he was asking us for help. But European Union, 27 countries, it's very difficult to make quick decision. So we couldn't help him that evening. And I saw him as he was closing the lid of his notebook, leaving that meeting because it was Zoom. And he said, well, gentlemen, I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry, I have to go. We're under the war. We are being bombed. And if you cannot help me, then I have to go. And if I don't see you anymore, then just all the best, and I will see. So it left, and it was really very, very bad atmosphere in the room. We could feel how the pin dropped on the floor. And we didn't know whether he's going to survive the next morning. But he did. And the reason I'm saying that, because then the whole Western countries got in, and we all said, we're going to help Ukraine. We have to help Ukraine. They are one of us. They are a country who is fighting for their freedom. And as I said, it's not only about the territory, it's about the values. So we got in and we stepped in. But that's when Vladimir Putin realized, okay, I cannot beat Ukraine because they have strong support of the West with the military force. So what I have to do, I have to start undermine their societies. And that's where we started to see a great influx and flood of disinformation attacking our own societies, our governments, our values. I, as a prime minister, expelled over 30 diplomats, Russian diplomats operating in Slovakia, because we actually saw what they do. They were bribing reporters in our media to write the way they wanted. And I wouldn't say how the Russian embassy on Facebook, which is the biggest platform, most of the people are on Facebook, was really flooding the Slovak realm, the Slovak social platforms with disinformation. So this is the background that we are here. The one more thing that I want to add before we go to the solutions and what needs to be done in order to really lead in democracy and overcome these challenges we face is that we have to realize we are in digital era. I was born in the analog world. When I was born and I grew up, we were operating in analog. I have to actually learn, I'm almost 50, I have to learn how to operate in digital era. And you know, when you're in this transition generation, it feels like, well, you don't want to really embrace the new thing. You want to kind of resist it and keep and hold on the old ones. But that's not possible. I mean, we have to realize we are in the digital era and we are not going to go back just like the industrial revolution where it came. We never went back. So we have to learn to embrace it and we have to learn to accommodate. Because our opponent, our enemy, I would say, is operating in the digital era very greatly. And I speak of the disinformation. The state of art of messages that are being sent on all kinds of social platforms, they are really thought through. And I know what I speak about because my government fall also partially, and the reason why we have now a government that is very pro-Russian is because the Russian propaganda helped them to create a wave on which the current government, back then the opposition, was sliding on and actually was able to win the elections. So I see the power of the opponent, of the enemy, how they can really change and manipulate the public opinion because we are not resilient enough to the digital era. We see very often how especially elderly people, when they get a smartphone or an iPad, within 6 months the latest, they are totally manipulated by the disinformation that they receive on the social platforms. And I heard that from many stories I heard like this in Slovakia. So we haven't learned how to be resilient and how to actually how to be able to discern what is truth and what is not. Because there is so much information out there and we haven't learned that as a society, I think, of the modern world or in general. So the digital era is something that is here and we have to accommodate as quick as possible and learn how to resist. Because, as I said, the autocracies and the autocratic leaders, what they see, if they want to expand their influence, their imperiums, they must undermine our democracies. They must undermine the thoughts of the citizens in democracies. So for us, it's a great challenge that we have to face and we have to succeed is how to build a resilient citizens in our countries. So they will know and they will understand why the democracy is so important. That's why I'm so glad that we have this conference. We can speak about it and really look at the possible ways how to do this. But the first thing I think is very important that we focus and realize that for us, the task number one, the most important, is to build a strong resilient societies of citizens in our countries, and knowing what are the challenges that we're facing and what is the background or the state of play that we are living in. Now, speaking of the leaders, even in the democratic countries, as I said, there is a rise of populism. Now, why there is a rise of populism in our countries, in democracies? Because the people somehow were lacking the leaders who are decisive, who are bold, who are courageous. And people actually, even with the digital age, everything comes quickly. You want to know something, you don't have to go to library anymore. You don't have to seek it. You just Google it out, not even a second, and you have the result, right? ChatGPT, all that. So we learned to get everything very quickly. It's an instant era, I would say. And the populists are the people who don't mind to promise anything without knowing it's not possible to do, right? So, but the people, because they're so occupied with so much information, they don't really have time to go deeper into the reasons for those messages, for the politics. They don't have time to follow the politics so closely. So that's why those who are capable to pretend that they have all the solutions, they speak it with persuasion and really boldness and courage, those win the elections most likely. And we have to realize that this radicality for solutions is expected by the people, and we have to reflect to that. But one thing I want to say is that if you look at the politics, the populists, what they do, they mess or they play with fear. They use fear as the main instrument on getting the votes. And there are some subjects of fear that are real, but there are some subjects of fear that are totally made up. For example, I'll tell you again, Slovak example. The fear of Third World War as a neighboring country, it's a real fear. You see, I was in Bucha. I was in Bucha several times. I was in Ukraine, visited after the Bucha massacre. I saw what the war can do to people. I saw how the people on the streets are helpless when the bomb's coming. They don't have any shelters. They can go only underneath the ground, right, and protect themselves. But that's all. They don't know whether they're going to blow up or not because the rocket is coming. So that, I mean, yes, when you feel and see this close to your border, yes, you might be afraid of a war coming to your territory. But there is fear that is made up. And that was in presidential election in Slovakia just recently, spring this year. We had two candidates, and one of them accused the other one that if you are the president, you will send our boys to fight at Ukraine, which was totally made up. A president doesn't have such competence in first place, but it was never intended that our soldiers will go and actually fight. We gave a lot of equipment because we wanted them to protect, but not for the soldiers to fight. That was not on the table at all. But he was accused, and he says, if I'm the president, I guarantee you that I will not do that. Well, he guaranteed something that didn't have the competence anyway. But over this message, he won the election in the second round because he was losing in the first round. But in the second, this was the main message that shook a couple days prior the elections, and it shook with the people, and he won with basically 5% lead. So I say that, but because we as a political leaders in democracy, we must be aware and we must also be bold and courageous. But there is one difference between the populists and us, and it's the morale, it's the integrity, it's the character. And we need leaders who are of strong morale, who are integral, but who are also resilient. And what I mean by that, when you step into politics, they're going to really strip you off. They're going to test everything. And we as a politicians must pass this test. We must be humble. We must live life that it can go through fire, and we will pass this test. And we also have to be wise, but we also have to be very skilled in communication. Because this is, as I said, the digital era plus the challenges, and showing the decisiveness and also showing the care for people. Because I think one of the reasons why the democracy matured, or basically the challenges of the society matured, and the democracy must mature to this, it must also show care for people. Sometimes I'm coming from a background where there was a socialism, right? Communism. Those people said that they cared for people. Well, they cared too much. They didn't allow them to travel. They didn't allow them to have an opinion, etc., etc. I don't mean this kind of care. But as I say, we have to understand which fear is based on, is real, and which is not. And we have to have the understanding for the people. If they fear something, and we have to deal with it with care. We have to deal with it and communicate so they understand that we are not ignorant to them. So we are not negligent to their needs. And also being bold to communicate and explain. It's very difficult, but we have to find those tools, the modern tools of the digital era, how to communicate it. And we must be leaders capable of fostering respect. That's how we will depolarize. And we'll introduce respect again. We will introduce truth. We'll introduce reconciliation. We will introduce peace. I'm really crying and I'm angry when I see that the populists in my country, speaking of peace, that's not a just peace. And I will speak of that about it in a minute. So this is what we need to bring, and also justice within the society. Now, speaking of this, it goes hand in hand with the courage and with the strength, with the boldness of the leaders. And now I would like to speak a little bit about the other topic that I wanted to share. One was the resilient citizens and resilient society. In order to do that, you have to have leaders who step in. And I am a Christian, and I want to encourage all the Christians to do that, because we as a Christians are brought up and taught and trained in serving. And serving, politics is about serving, right? Nobody really believes that anymore because they think it's about ruling. Well, we know that if you want to rule, you must start to serve, because actually serving that's how you rule the best. It's not on your interest, it's for the interest of the society, of the good of the humankind. That's why I want to encourage, and I feel even with my experience, it's so important to really, for people of morale, of integrity, of values, to step in and fight for it. And the second thing that is very important is to understand who are our allies and who are our enemies. And I want to say here on the US ground that for United States, the greatest ally is the European Union, besides other Western countries or developed countries. But EU is very important. And we have to understand that we too, US and EU, if we are allied, we are strong allies, then we can really lead the world for the better future. And that's very important to understand. And that's why we need to listen to each other. We need to understand the challenges from our perspectives. Because as I said, the way the Russian war in Ukraine will end, it will have impact on generations, on decades. It will have a direct impact on Taiwan. China's leadership is watching how the Western world, how the democratic countries will respond, whether they will be bold and strong, defending their values, or they will give up. And if they give up, they know, okay, easy target, we can move on. Because that's to them weakness. That's to them weakness, and they go after it. So this is very important to understand. And the role of propaganda is also very important to understand. Ladies and gentlemen, my time is up. So I just want to close it up and tell you one story that happened in 1989. Actually, the story started much earlier. And it's the story of people that in 1968, when the Soviet tanks came to Czechoslovakia, because we wanted to become, as a communist country, we wanted to become more democratic. We wanted to be more open, allow people to have different opinions, listen to what the people in the Western countries to share. But the Soviet army came in 1968, just like it was trying to come now in 2022 Ukraine. And we were stopped. A normalization came. But the people wanted freedom. They wanted freedom. And they didn't give up. And they were fighting, they were pushed underground, they couldn't study, they couldn't have good jobs, they struggled. But there was a great communities of Christians, but also people who weren't believers, civic society. And they worked together to undermine the communist regime and actually overthrow it. They didn't know when it's going to happen. They didn't know that there is specific date to it. You could say they didn't really see the light at the end of the tunnel, but they fought for it and they believed and they went after it. And in 1989, it happened. Now we're looking back and it was like, oh yeah, it makes sense. But they didn't know it's going to be 1989. But they were able to get rid of the autocracy in our area, in our region, and start to build democracy. So if they were able to overthrow an authoritarian regime and introduce democracy, then we must be able to defend democracy and not allow the autocracy to overthrow our societies with all possible means. And this is what keeps me very hoping and believing and fighting for really building up a better future based on democratic foundation, and wanting to really help young people, but also older people, to be active, not just in the politics, but active in the civic life and really caring for what the politicians do, and give them a mirror, give them and tell them that you cannot do whatever you want. We will take you accountable. We will look at you and we will want you to be accountable to us. And not just a year or half a year in campaign before the elections, but throughout the whole life, because that helps the leaders to stay integral, strong, and humble at the same time, if they see that they are accountable. So, dear ladies and gentlemen, I just want to leave you with 3 sentences that led me through my times of government, which was very difficult, as I mentioned, and which keeps me hoping that we in Slovakia will be able to bring a government that will be, again, very pro-European, pro-democratic, pro-growth, pro-peace, but also keeping the values that we live. And those 3 sentences were that we built on experience. We built on experience. We cannot undermine the people with wisdom, experience that we have. We have to work with them and all the generations, etc. The second sentence is that we join forces. Having allies is the great thing of humankind. That's the spirit we have to introduce to the world. Not polarization, not division, not being envious, not mock anybody, but join forces, looking for the way where we meet and work on more of it. And we never give up. We never give up. And I encourage you, please never give up. You are the messengers. You are the ambassadors because you came to this conference. You are very important. Don't ever think that one cannot do much. It always starts with one. And last story, I will close up. When Jesus, as a Christian, it will be a biblical story to those of you who are not Christians. When Jesus was leaving this world, he met with his disciples. It was 12 of them. And he gave them 2 commands, we can read it, I think, in Mark and Matthew. And he said, I'm leaving you. I will send you the Holy Spirit. But I go into the whole world and share the gospel and make disciples of the nations. And they could feel like, who are we? 12 guys, the whole world. Who are we? But look, 2,000 years later, it's a church over 1 billion people. If they could do it, only 12, we can do anything. With his grace, with his mercy, with his help, but even as united together. So please believe that you can change, and you have to. I ask you, please go and be the change makers for the positive and better future. Thank you very much.
You've been listening to the For the Good of the Public podcast, an initiative of the Center for Christianity and Public Life. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast so you don't miss an episode. CCPL is a donor-supported nonprofit. Visit our website at ccpubliclife.org to learn how you can partner with us, and connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Our hosts for today's episode are CCPL founder and CEO Michael Ware, and myself, Chief of Staff and Senior Advisor Phebe Meyer. Our podcast is produced by Glowfire Creative and Liminal Podcasts. Our in-studio recording engineer is Conrad Ossie Poets. Our podcast editor is Seth Creekmore, and our theme music is Lamb's Farm by Sam Barsh.